Danni Dayan is chairman of the Settlers Council. He joins me live from Jerusalem. And Jamal Jumaa is a Palestinian activist. He is live in Ramallah for us. Let's start off with you, Mr. Dayan. How do you think the talks are going? There's been the reiteration of a two-state solution with Palestinians and Israelis living side by side peacefully and in a secure environment. Is that likely to happen?
No, unfortunately, the negotiations are completely futile. This formula of Palestinian state, as a matter of fact, it was already performed. It was performed in Gaza. It was experimented in Gaza, and it failed colossally. Every single cent, every single euro that was channeled into the de facto Palestinian state that exists in Gaza was used not for highways, not for hospitals, not for schools, but to amass armaments for the destruction of Israel. The same thing will happen if a Palestinian state is created in Judea and Samaria. And
okay, so if there is no possibility of a Palestinian state, what is the only option then?
Well, we have to find the modus vivendi in a situation that right now cannot be solved permanently. I think that you have to remember that even under the current situation, the Palestinian citizen in Ramallah is the only Arab in the Middle East, except, of course, the Israeli Arabs, that choose their leaders. The Palestinians in Ramallah choose Mahmoud Abbas and Salam Fayyad. This is a right, a privilege.
Okay, let's bring in Mr. Jumaa, who is
Egyptian citizen in Cairo
is quite keen to challenge you on what you said. Mr. Jumaa, come in.
Excuse me.
Mr. Jumaa, you
Palestinians in Ramallah, Palestinians in Ramallah, in Jenin, and all the West Bank, they are living in ghettos and Bantustans and cantons now because of the settlers, because of the Israeli apartheid racist policies to control all over the Palestinian land. This is the main obstacle from what's so-called peace. Peace is not going to achieve based on these things. There is something called international law, human rights laws, and United Nations resolutions that should be implemented. And this is a responsibility of the international community, responsibility of the states who's responsible and looking over this conflict since long years. We have a major problem here of a racist settlers and racist government who's insisting that they want to continue their colonial project in the West Bank.
Well, Mr. Jumaa, it seems that the settlers are not likely to stop in settling on your land, even though they're breaking international law. Do you think that Palestinians will accept other land in a possible land swap in order to ensure peace?
Palestinians won't accept that the settlements will stay in the Palestinian areas. All what we have from our historic Palestine is 12%. We want to have an independent state here, free from settlements, free from these criminal settlers who's attacking the Palestinians systematically every day on their land, which is now going on in this moment in many villages and many places, declaring also a new 13,000 housing units is going to be built after the 26th.
Okay, let me put that issue to Mr. Dayan. He just brought up 13,000 units which have been fully approved. Hold on, let me just ask you this question. The government is still pouring money into settlements. Hold on, let me finish. Still pouring money into settlements, water, electricity, security, and yet the government is saying that they are willing to end the occupation in a year's time. How is this going to work?
Well, I don't know. I don't think it will work. But the demagoguery of the gentleman from Ramallah will not change the facts. He talks about racism, but wants a state clean, completely ethnically clean from any Jewish presence. May I remind you that in Israel, 20% of the citizens are Arabs. In the future Palestinian state that this gentleman envisioned, it should be clear for any Jewish presence. That is racism. He talks about violence. Should I remind you
Gaza should
that
be clear from any settler, from
this
should be the Palestinian independent state.
For innocent,
you are controlling over 60% of the West Bank now.
May I remind you that just 2 weeks ago,
state.
Excuse me, may I ask your defense against this gentleman's violence?
From. You are still living in the Middle Ages.
Okay,
the issue here, Mr. Jumaa, isn't it, and Mr. Dayan, is that the settlers are on land which is not there. They are breaking international law. They are breaking the Geneva Fourth Convention.
Excuse me, the Palestinians do not want any Jewish presence in this area, not in Judea and Samaria, not in Tel Aviv, and not in Haifa, not in Jerusalem. This is the gist of the question. May I remind you that we are in Judea and Samaria as a result of the defensive war in which we repelled the aggression that was intended to exterminate the state of Israel. That is the gist of the question.
Resources,
may I remind this gentleman that when he talks about violence, that 4 innocent Israelis were murdered by Palestinian terrorists.
Let's try and, excuse me, interrupting, gentlemen. Mr. Jumaa, I mean, what do you really think will resolve this standoff? Clearly the settlers are not going to stop. The settlers have said that they'll bring down the government if need be to get what they want. What options are open to you Palestinians, considering how weakly, from a weak position, Mahmoud Abbas goes into these talks?
We are totally held to the international law, and we are asking strongly and urgently the United States and the United Nations to take their moral stand for the implementation of the United Nations resolutions.
Yes, but you know that's not going to happen. So what other options do you think are open? It hasn't happened.
It's their problems. Leave the story for next generations. We are not going to surrender here for a Bantustan state, for a colonial mentality that's controlling every single centimeter on the West Bank and on our life. This is a racist apartheid regime, and they have to face this. We have our struggle all over the world on this issue. Like the apartheid regime fall in South Africa, this racist apartheid regime in Israel should be fall.
Okay, let me just put a last question.
The problem now is that the racism is not just with the settlers, it's with the government.
Let me put this last question. Excuse me, Mr. Jumaa, we've got your point. Mr. Dayan, you have threatened Netanyahu to bring down his government if the freeze on the settlements is not continued. How's that going to happen, and will you go through with that threat?
Well, it's very simple. In the last elections in February 2009, a Knesset, a parliament, in which a very clear majority that supports the notion that we have to continue to develop the communities in Judea and Samaria was elected, and therefore there is no majority for any other policy. But I have to remind you that demagoguery and words like racism and apartheid do not change the situation. The situation is that the Palestinian violence is threatening our lives. The situation is that the gentleman from Ramallah wants a state that is completely clear for any Jewish presence. He wants a Palestinian state.
Let's leave it on that standoff, and I hope that if a two-state solution doesn't work and there is a one-state solution, you don't end up living next to each other. Mr. Jumaa, Mr. Dayan, thanks very much for your time talking to us here on Al Jazeera.